The gym was alive with the sharp crack of gloves hitting heavy bags, the metallic squeak of jump ropes, and the low hum of idle chatter between sparring rounds. Sweat clung to the air. At the center of it all stood Marcus the King Rudd, a local boxing champion whose name carried as much arrogance as it did skill. His smile was smug, the kind that made people either want to follow him or flatten him. Across the ring, near the far wall where the shadows pooled, a girl leaned quietly against the ropes. Barely in her late teens, she wore a faded hoodie and scuffed sneakers. Most people didn't even know her name. She'd been coming to the gym for weeks, watching, never stepping into the ring. When she moved, it was with the kind of measured stillness that didn't invite attention. But Marcus noticed her today. "You." His voice sliced through the noise. The conversations around them halted, eyes snapping toward the sound. He jabbed a gloved finger in her direction. "Yeah, you in the hoodie. You look like you've been judging my form from over there. Care to show us what you've got?" The girl stiffened. Her gaze flicked to the floor, then back up, locking on to Marcus. The smallest twitch at the corner of her mouth suggested she might laugh, or maybe bristle. "I'm just here to watch," she said, quietly, but her voice carried. Marcus laughed, the kind of laugh designed to draw the crowd in. "Come on, don't be shy. What's the worst that could happen? You trip over your own feet?" A ripple of chuckles swept through the gym. She didn't move, but he wasn't about to let it go. "Or maybe you're scared," he taunted, tapping his gloves together in a steady rhythm. "Scared to get in the ring with someone who might actually show you what real boxing looks like." That hit a nerve. Her fingers curled around the rope, the nylon biting into her palm. She told herself she didn't care. She told herself this wasn't her fight, but behind her eyes, something tightened. An old, familiar burn. Marcus turned to the crowd, playing them like an instrument. "What do you think, folks? Should we let her hide over there? Or should she show us if she's got any skills worth talking about?" The voices rose in a chorus of encouragement, some playful, others jeering. Someone shouted, "Don't worry, Marcus will go easy." Another added, "She won't last 30 seconds. She exhaled slowly. She had walked into this gym to stay invisible, to keep her promise. But now, every pair of eyes was on her, and Marcus's smirk was cutting deeper than she wanted to admit. Her mind flashed unbidden to the day she swore off fighting, the day everything changed, but she forced the memory back. This wasn't the time. This wasn't the place. "Fine," she said at last, her voice steady. "One round." The crowd erupted, some clapping, others exchanging wide-eyed grins. Marcus grinned like a man who thought he'd just won something. If you're enjoying this story of justice and hidden strength, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to find out how a simple act of prejudice turned into the most valuable lesson of Marcus Rudd's life. She stepped toward the ring, peeling off her hoodie to reveal simple black workout gear. The muscles in her arms were lean but well-defined, honed by something more than casual training. Marcus didn't notice. He was too busy soaking in the attention. As she climbed through the ropes, her eyes didn't leave his. Somewhere deep inside, the burn in her chest had transformed into something colder, sharper. She wasn't here to impress anyone. She wasn't here to win over a crowd. She was here to prove something, not to him, but to herself. The moment her feet touched the canvas, the smell of old sweat and leather wrapped around her like a memory she'd been trying to bury. The bright overhead lights seemed to hum louder, and her pulse quickened in rhythm with that low, electric buzz. Marcus bounced lightly on his toes, the picture of a man enjoying himself far too much. "Don't worry," he said, raising his gloves in mock reassurance. "I'll be gentle." She didn't respond. Her mind was elsewhere, back in a smaller ring, in a different gym, years ago. She saw her father's face, sweat beading on his brow, eyes sharp but kind as he wrapped her hands. "You've got speed in your bones, Amara," he used to tell her. "But speed without control is just noise. Control is what wins fights." The last time she'd heard those words was the night everything went wrong. A street match she hadn't wanted, a man twice her size, and a single punch that ended in flashing ambulance lights. She hadn't known he'd had a heart condition. The guilt of it had crushed her so thoroughly she'd promised herself, no more. No more fights. No more rings. Now here she was, her gloves being laced by an old trainer who seemed oblivious to the war raging behind her calm expression. "You sure you want this?" he murmured, low enough for only her to hear. She nodded once. "Just one round." The crowd was already closing in around the ring, their voices a constant murmur of expectation. Marcus fed off it, showboating with a quick flurry of jabs at the air, grinning at the gasps he drew from his fans. Amara stood still, rolling her shoulders once, inhaling through her nose, exhaling through her mouth. She wasn't here to play his game. She knew his type, all flash, no patience, the kind of fighter who underestimated anyone who didn't match his swagger. Marcus leaned against the ropes, cocky as ever. "You got a nickname, mystery girl?" She shook her head. "Then I'll give you one when we're done," he said, with a grin, his voice carrying easily over the crowd's chatter. Her jaw tightened, but she said nothing. The bell hadn't rung yet, and already her chest felt like it was holding two different storms. The calm discipline her father had drilled into her, and the restless spark of anger Marcus kept stoking. "All right, people," the coach called out. "One round, 2 minutes, keep it clean." Marcus gave a mock salute. Amara just nodded. As she touched gloves with him, his smirk widened. She felt the weight of his arrogance through that brief contact, and beneath it, the challenge. The bell clanged. Marcus lunged forward with playful jabs, testing her. She sidestepped effortlessly, her movements precise, controlled. The crowd oohed as if they'd just noticed she wasn't flinching. Marcus chuckled, circling her. "Not bad," he teased, "but I hope you've got more than running in you." She didn't answer. Instead, she tracked the way his left shoulder rolled before each jab, the way his guard dropped just slightly when he overextended. Details, weaknesses. She'd promised herself she wouldn't fight. But as she watched him, she realized maybe she didn't have to break that promise. Maybe she just needed to remind herself what she was capable of. The gym's energy shifted the moment Marcus realized she wasn't just dodging at random. The first 30 seconds had been a game to him, but now his brow furrowed slightly as he adjusted his stance. The crowd picked up on it too. The laughter softened into murmurs, the teasing calls into curious silence. "Come on, give us a show," someone yelled from the back. Another voice, sharper, taunted. "What's the matter, Marcus? She faster than you thought?" Amara kept her focus tight, her breathing steady. She could feel the weight of every stare in the room, but she refused to let it push her into carelessness. The promise she'd made years ago still pressed against her ribs like a locked box she refused to open. Marcus, though, thrived on pressure. He started throwing combinations, the thud of leather against the air echoing like distant thunder. Each punch came faster than the last, and still she slipped just out of range, her feet gliding over the canvas as if she'd been born there. The crowd was warming to her now, though some still jeered. "Stop running," one called out. Another laughed. "She's scared to hit you, Marcus." A flicker of heat rose in Amara's chest. Scared. If only they knew. Her father's voice drifted back through the noise. "It's not about fear, it's about timing. The punch you don't throw matters as much as the one you do." Marcus feinted left, then came in hard with a right hook meant to clip her temple. She dipped low, the glove grazing her hair, and pivoted out of range. She saw the brief flash of frustration in his eyes before he masked it with a grin. "You're quick," he admitted between breaths, "but let's see how long you can dance." He pressed forward, backing her toward the corner. The crowd roared, sensing the shift. The ropes were only a step behind her now. For a moment, panic nipped at the edge of her control. The corner was a trap, a place where power beat speed. But then she remembered another lesson, one her father had drilled into her on days she'd wanted to quit. When they think they've cornered you, that's when you choose where the fight goes next. Her eyes flicked to Marcus's lead foot. Too far forward, too much weight on it. A gap in his defense was opening, just for a heartbeat. The bell rang, ending the first minute. The crowd groaned with disappointment, thinking the pace might slow. Marcus stepped back, grinning like he had all the time in the world. But Amara knew better. That gap she'd seen, it wouldn't be there forever. She had to decide whether to take it when the next round of movement began. She bounced lightly on her toes. Every muscle tuned to the rhythm of his breathing, the shift of his shoulders. She wasn't here to win over the crowd. She wasn't here to humiliate Marcus. She was here because the only way to keep her promise intact was to control this fight before it controlled her. And if that meant ending it quickly, so be it. The bell's echo faded into a taut silence, broken only by the sound of sneakers squeaking faintly on the canvas. Amara's eyes were locked on Marcus's posture, memorizing every twitch of muscle. She didn't need to rush, she needed to wait, the way her father had taught her. Marcus, mistaking her stillness for fatigue, smirked and began pacing to his left. He liked to circle opponents, forcing them into angles where his dominant right hand could land clean. Most people didn't realize how predictable he was when he got confident. But Amara did. The smell of chalky resin and sweat pulled her mind back into the past, a cramped living room in their old apartment, where her father had set up a makeshift punching station with nothing more than a heavy bag, duct tape, and determination. "One day," he told her, "you'll meet someone who doesn't respect you until you make them. That's when you use this." He'd shown her a punch he'd called the breaker. It wasn't about brute force. It was about precision, timing, and hitting a target so vulnerable it didn't matter how big or strong they were. She'd never needed to use it outside of training. Until the night of that street match, when the man collapsed after she landed it. Her stomach tightened at the memory of his body hitting the ground. She had replayed that moment for years, hearing the sirens, feeling the sick weight of knowing she'd gone too far. It was why she'd sworn never to fight again, but Marcus wasn't that man, and this wasn't a street fight. He lunged forward, snapping out a jab, then another, then a sweeping hook, meant to send her back into the corner. She slipped each strike, her body moving in time, with a rhythm she could feel deep in her bones. The crowd had gone from mocking to murmuring in awe. "She's reading him," someone whispered. "She's not even breaking a sweat." Marcus's grin faltered just slightly. He started to throw heavier shots, his breathing growing louder. Amara's gaze dipped again to his lead foot, too far forward, weight sinking where it shouldn't. That was the trigger. Her father's voice echoed, steady and calm. When you see the stance, you take the shot. No hesitation, she inched closer, testing the distance, her hands still high. Marcus thought she was backing down, that she'd lost her nerve. The truth was, she'd found her opening. Her pulse slowed, not sped up. The noise of the gym fell away, replaced by the quiet clarity she'd only ever felt in those long-ago training sessions. She wasn't just going to hit him, she was going to finish this and keep her promise, all in the same moment. The bell rang again, snapping the air like a starting pistol. Marcus came forward immediately, gloves high, that familiar cocky tilt in his chin. He was expecting her to keep dodging, to keep playing the prey so he could play the predator. But Amara didn't move back. Her stillness startled him for half a second, just long enough for her to note the faint crease between his brows. Doubt. She could work with that. He threw a sharp left jab. She slipped it easily. Her right foot sliding back at an angle, her weight perfectly balanced. He stepped in harder, launching a looping right hook aimed at her ribs. She pivoted, letting the punch skim past her side, and for the briefest moment, his body was wide open. The crowd gasped at her precision, but Marcus only grinned wider. "All right, you got moves," he taunted, "but let's see if you can handle this." He surged forward, throwing a barrage of punches, keyed hooks, uppercuts, jabs, everyone meant to overwhelm. Most people would have folded under that storm. But Amara's world had narrowed to the smallest details, the way his elbows flared when he got tired, the extra breath he took before committing to his right hand, the steady drift of his lead foot too far inward. And then it happened. His left heel rotated out of habit, opening the exact gap her father had drilled into her mind years ago. She saw it as clearly as if someone had drawn a red circle around it. Her weight shifted to her back foot. She let her right shoulder coil, not telegraphing the strike, just letting the motion flow from the ground up. "Now," her father's voice whispered. Her right fist shot forward in a compact, explosive arc. It landed flush on Marcus's jaw, not wild, not desperate, but surgical. The sound was sharp, almost anticlimactic, but the effect was immediate. Marcus's head snapped to the side, his knees buckled. For a split second, disbelief registered in his eyes before his body folded and he collapsed onto the canvas. The gym went silent. Gloves hung in midair. Mouths fell open. Even the steady hum of the lights seemed to fade under the weight of the moment. Amara stepped back, breathing evenly, her expression unreadable. She didn't raise her hands or gloat. She simply stood there, looking down at him as if to say this was never about proving anything to you. The referee knelt beside Marcus, checking his pulse and asking questions he was too dazed to answer. Slowly, the crowd began to murmur again, the noise rising like a tide, disbelief, admiration, and the inevitable retelling of what they'd just witnessed. But Amara was already pulling off her gloves, her eyes distant. She'd landed the breaker, she'd ended the fight. And for the first time in years, the weight in her chest felt lighter. The crowd's murmurs swelled into a storm of voices, disbelief clashing with exhilaration. Some were shouting her name now, though most had only learned it seconds earlier when the referee asked for it to announce her win. Others just stood frozen, replaying the single, perfect punch in their minds. Marcus sat on the canvas, head in his hands, still trying to clear the fog. The arrogance that had dripped from him earlier seemed to have drained out, replaced by a stunned quiet. Amara stepped through the ropes without a backward glance. She didn't need to see his face. She'd already read enough in the slump of his shoulders, in the way his gaze stayed low. This wasn't about humiliating him, it was about reminding herself of who she was and who she refused to become. But the quiet didn't last. "Hey, girl!" a man from the crowd called out as she reached for her hoodie. "Where do you learn to fight like that?" Another voice. "Was that luck, or can you actually teach that punch?" She ignored them, slipping her arms into her sleeves. The zipper hissed upward as she turned toward the door, every step deliberate, her heartbeat finally slowing. And then a flash of a memory stopped her mid-stride. Her father in the hospital bed, his voice hoarse but steady. "You've got a gift, Amara, but it's not meant for every fight. Save it for the ones that matter." Her gut twisted. Was this fight one that mattered? She'd kept her promise not to waste her skill on petty pride, but wasn't responding to Marcus's arrogance just that. Behind her, Marcus's trainer was helping him to his feet. "You okay?" the older man asked, his voice more gentle than mocking. Marcus nodded stiffly. Yeah, I'm fine." But his eyes tracked Amara as she pushed the gym door open. Something in his expression had shifted. Less bruised ego, more curiosity. Outside, the night air was cool, the city's sounds a stark contrast to the heat and noise she'd left behind. She pulled her hood up, stuffing her hands into the pockets. The fight had been quick, but the echoes of it rang in her bones. She knew she hadn't come here to make friends, and she certainly hadn't come here to be noticed, but she had been, and that meant sooner or later someone was going to come looking for her. Some fights ended when the bell rang, others had a way of following you out the door. The next few days passed in relative quiet, but the story of the fight refused to die. Videos from shaky phone cameras were circulating online, each clip titled more dramatically than the last. "One Punch Wonder Stuns Local Champ. Mystery Girl Floors Marcus Rudd." Every feed she opened, every text from old gym acquaintances, carried the same question. Was that really you? Amara ignored them. She kept her head down, worked her shifts at the cafe, and avoided the gym entirely. She told herself it was better this way. But the truth was, a part of her couldn't stop replaying the moment, the gap in Marcus's stance, the clean connection of her fist, the stunned silence afterward. Not for pride, but for what it meant. She still had control. On the fourth evening, as the cafe was closing, she noticed a tall figure lingering outside the glass door. At first, she thought it was a customer who'd missed the open hours. Then he stepped into the glow of the street lamp. Marcus. He wasn't in training gear this time, just a hoodie, jeans, and an expression that was surprisingly hard to read. She opened the door halfway. "If you're here to ask for a rematch—" "I'm not," he cut in quickly, raising his hands as if to show he was unarmed. "Look, I came to apologize." That caught her off guard. Marcus rubbed the back of his neck, searching for words. "What I did that day, calling you out like that, it wasn't about you. I've made a habit of looking for easy wins. I thought I was untouchable." His mouth twisted in a self-deprecating smile. "You proved me wrong, in front of everyone." Amara leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "And what, you want me to feel sorry for embarrassing you?" He shook his head. "No, I want to understand." His gaze met hers, and for once, there was no challenge in it. "That punch, I've never seen anything like it. Where'd you learn that?" Her first instinct was to shut him down, to keep her father's lessons locked away where no one could exploit them. But then she saw the genuine curiosity in his eyes. Not greed, not ego, just respect. She hesitated. "From someone who believed respect matters more than winning," she said finally. Marcus nodded slowly, as if committing the words to memory. Maybe you could teach me sometime. Not the punch, the other part. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she studied him, weighing the man who'd mocked her in front of a crowd against the one standing in the cool night air, owning his mistake. Finally, she stepped back from the door. If you're serious, meet me at the gym tomorrow. Early, no cameras. His smile was faint, but real. I'll be there. As he walked away, she felt the faintest easing in her chest. Maybe some fights didn't follow you to hurt you. Maybe they followed you to change you. 3 weeks later, the gym looked different to Amara. Not because the walls had changed, but because the air felt lighter. The morning sun streamed through the high windows, painting the canvas in soft gold. Marcus was already there, gloves laced, sweat on his brow from the warm-up. He greeted her with a nod, nothing more, but the absence of swagger was its own kind of greeting. They began without ceremony, moving through basic drills. She corrected his stance, slowed his jab, and reminded him, over and over, that power meant nothing without control. Well, the first few sessions had been awkward, his competitive instincts flaring whenever she caught him slipping. But now his movements were sharper, his guard tighter. More importantly, his eyes stayed focused, not on impressing her or an imaginary audience, but on the work. Between rounds, they sat on the edge of the ring, sipping water. Marcus broke the silence. You know that punch? It still rattles around in my head, Amara smirked faintly. You mean the one that put you on the floor? He chuckled. Yeah, that one. I've been thinking. It wasn't just the punch that beat me. It was the fact that you waited. You didn't give me what I wanted. You gave me what I deserved. Her expression softened. My father used to say fighting is about more than fists. It's about reading people. If you know what they want, you can choose whether to give it to them. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Guess I needed to learn that the hard way. In the weeks that followed, their training partnership drew quiet attention from the regulars. The same crowd that had once laughed now nodded in approval as they passed. The story of one punch was still told, but now it ended with something better. A change in the man who took it. One crisp morning, after a session, Marcus lingered as she packed her bag. You ever regret it, hitting me that day? Amara paused. No, because it wasn't about you. She slung the strap over her shoulder. It was about keeping a promise to myself, that I'd only fight when it mattered. They walked out together, the cool air wrapping around them. Neither spoke for a while, but it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. As they reached the corner where their paths split, Marcus extended a hand. She took it, the shake firm, respectful. Thanks, he said simply, for the punch and for what came after. She watched him go, the corners of her mouth lifting just slightly. Some fights left scars, others left lessons. And every once in a while, if you were lucky, they left both people better than before. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel to discover more stories about how extraordinary people turn humiliation into triumph.